Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1372. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1372, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to civil law, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Osseo, Representative Smith, to introduce your bill.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Members, this bill 1372 is a collection of 4 bills. It is the State Bar Association technical bill. There is no opposition stated. The first piece is Representative Hortman's bill. It protects dissenters' rights when an LLC converts to a public benefit corporation. It accounts for different conversion terminology, and it clarifies the fees, which are the same from the old statute. The second piece is some technical changes to the great legislation by Representative Hoppe from a few years ago, talking about receiverships and assignments. And the third piece is an animal trust statute allowing assets to be handed to a trustee in a fiduciary format. And then Article 2 is some changes to the probate code, aligning provisions with the existing trust code. And I have an amendment, Mr. Speaker, the A2.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Smith moves to amend House File number 1372, the first engrossment, and the amendment is coded A2.
Representative Smith, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is some technical language to give some comfort to the Department of Revenue. They have signed off on this deal. It went through the tax committee without any controversy. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Discussion on the A2 amendment. Discussion to the A2 amendment. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the A2 amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hillstrom moves to amend House File number 1372, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A6.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this amendment is the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act. Members, with me today are Bill and Christy Anderson. They're in the back. Jake Anderson was from Orono, Minnesota, and he was a 19-year-old student at the University of Minnesota. On December 15th of 2013, he was found frozen to death near the Stone Arch Bridge in Minneapolis. That death was ruled an accidental death by hypothermia, which made it so that the Andersons were not able to access his telephone, which he had with him when he died, or able to access his digital assets. So the Andersons came to me and said, we have a problem and we need your help, and here's the bill we want you to carry. And that is this bill, members. Members, what this does is this makes your digital assets the same as if you had the assets of a chair or any other piece of asset. So members, you would have the ability to declare someone to have access to that. So fiduciaries, including conservators, powers of attorney in fact appointed pursuant to a power of attorney, a trust to a trustee to a trust, a personal representative to an estate, you would be able to, as part of your estate, determine who should have access to your digital assets. That's what this bill does. It makes it in line with our other assets, and I would ask members to support the bill.
There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Smith moves to amend the Hillstrom amendment to House File number 1372, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A13.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw that amendment.
Representative Smith withdraws the A13 amendment. Discussion to the A6 amendment, the Hillstrom amendment. The member from Carver, Representative Pugh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would like to thank Representative Hillstrom for her fantastic work on this important bill and presenting this amendment today. Bill and Christy are my constituents. I had an opportunity to first meet them when I came to the hearing at which you presented your bill. And I know that I'm stating that if if any one of us could possibly put ourselves in Bill and Christie's shoes, we would definitely want to support this bill today. So thank you so much, Representative Hillstrom. So grateful for your work.
The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm wondering if the amendment author would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hillstrom, I just am seeking some clarification regarding digital assets and the scope of the disclosure that would be required under the amendment. And specifically, so there's digital assets can come in many different forms. You've got cloud-based digital assets, websites, et cetera, and in many of those cases, the username and password are stored or available to the vendor. But then there's other types of digital assets like the mobile phone, et cetera, maybe an encrypted laptop. So does your bill in any way require vendors to crack the encryption that might be on any other type of digital asset where the credentials are stored locally and not available to the vendor?
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Lucero. So this would say that you, as the person who owns the assets, could give access to someone else. So if your will or your power of attorney gives them access to everything, then they would have access to everything. If it doesn't, then you would only have access to the items in particular that you gave someone the authority to do. Now, this is an agreement. Apple and Google have all signed off on this. This is a uniform act that's been passing across the country. They want the rules to be the same across the country so that when they have someone present that they have authority to access someone's account, they want to know what they're supposed to do. Are they supposed to disclose? Are they not supposed to disclose? They can't disclose something they don't have access to.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hillstrom. So then my understanding is that this is addressing authority to be able to disclose, not addressing methods by which to potentially access, et cetera. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Hillstrom amendment. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Hillstrom yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hillstrom, so under this amendment, what happens when a person dies without a will, which so often happens? Or what happens when a person, as probably pretty frequently, people don't necessarily want anyone to see what they have on their computer even after their death? What would happen in that case?
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So members, anyone can say, I don't want someone to have access. You can put that in your will, you could put that in a power of attorney document, you could choose to grant access or decline access to anyone. Many of these online entities have stated that they will create a form by which you can actually, even when you sign up, say, and upon my death, I want someone to be able to access it, or I want no one to be able to access these accounts. Under Minnesota law, if you die without a will, you go before the court. In many instances, this would then say that if the court appoints someone, they would have the same rights under current law as if it was a chair. We're not changing any of those rules, so whatever power are granted to the person through the court process, they would also have access to these assets.
Further discussion on the Hillstrom amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the A6 amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lesh moves to amend House File Number 1372, the first engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A16.
Recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lesh. To your
Thank you,
amendment.
Mr. Speaker. I withdraw the amendment.
Representative Lesh withdraws the, what was it, A16? Yep. The A16 amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment. Excuse me. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1372, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on the bill as amended. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I wanted to thank Representative Hillstrom for carrying the revised uniform
fiduciary access to digital assets bill, and also to thank Representative Smith for including my LLC bill in your civil law omnibus. The revised Uniform Act on Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets was the brainchild of a man named Gene Hennig, who served as a Minnesota Law Commissioner for many years, died last August of a brain tumor, but really did immeasurable service to the state of Minnesota and the country as a Uniform Law Commissioner. So thank you very much, Representative Hillstrom.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Representative Smith also. When I go back to Mankato and say we don't have a transportation bill or a bonding bill or a tax bill, but we have a bill for trust funds for dogs, that goes over really big every time. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. Barrett votes aye. There being 123 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.